His martial art background is minimal, yet he convincingly portrayed some of the scariest and most intimidating fighters in action movies. Without his relentless ambition and dedication to his best friend, Jean-Claude Van Damme, we might not have witnessed one of the toughest ballet dancers in the martial art business, known for his incredible splits and unbelievable high kicks. Meet Mohammed Qissi, also known by his stage name Michel. It all started in Brussels, Belgium, where a Moroccan-born boy named Mohammed spent his time hanging out with his friend Jean-Claude. Their favorite pastime was sneaking into the movie theater through the back door, making their way to the front, and lay down right under the big screen to watch their idols, Bruce Lee and Muhammad Ali. And after the movie, they would head back to the dojo to train. That's what they loved to do as kids. They both lived on the ground floor of the same building complex. Mohammed was practicing boxing, while Jean-Claude was into karate. Mohammed's role model at the time was Muhammad Ali, and he watched every single fight trying to emulate him. Out of curiosity, the boys would visit each other practice to check on their progress. Mohammed would watch Jean-Claude kicks, and Van Damme would join Qissi to hit the boxing bag.
I'll play with my legs like this, you know?
So he really could, oh my God!
Eventually, Mohammed decided to give Shotokan a try. During one of those visits, Jean-Claude's master told Qissi that he had a good chance of winning the karate tournament. After a short but convincing discussion, Mohammed agreed to participate, and both he and Jean-Claude went to test their luck. They were barely teenagers at the time, and the temptation of bragging rights of winning the championship was too much to resist. The tournament started rather well for Mohammed. He won his first 4 fights and was ready to enter the final. But a disaster struck out of nowhere. Since he was mostly practicing boxing where he wore shoes, he wasn't used to fight barefoot as required by tournament rules. After the first 4 fights, the skin on both his feet was burned out because the tournament was held on a wooden floor without a tatami mat. It all resulted in a defeat, but as Qissi would later recall, it was still a great practice to participate. Tournament experience excited Mohammed to explore kickboxing and Thai boxing, and since kickboxing heavily incorporated boxing techniques, it was an easy transition for Qissi. However, his primary specialty remained boxing, specifically English boxing. Jumping slightly ahead in his career, Mohammed would later become a go-to sparring partner for kickboxing legend Benny Urquidez in Northern Hollywood. But that's much later in his journey. Back to the Belgium. For the next several years, their lives revolved around school, training, and movies. Jean-Claude would often stay overnight at Mohammed's house because Qissi's mom was an excellent cook, and Jean-Claude's favorite was Moroccan tagine and harira soup. In return, Mohammed would have sleepovers at Jean-Claude's place, but instead of emptying the family refrigerator, he would help Jean-Claude's mom and dad with their flower shop. This was all great, but they both had a crazy idea. One day, they would leave their hometown and chase their ultimate dream, becoming martial art actors, just like Bruce Lee. In 1982, they decided to drop everything and head to the United States of America. Mohammed was only 20 and Jean-Claude was just 22 years old. Neither of them could speak English, but when has that ever stopped anyone from coming to America? Exactly. They only had tourist visa, so nobody would hire them for real jobs.
Remember, Simi, no one here can know I am royalty. You must appear to be no different than the average man.
The only way to survive was by taking whatever work they could find from anyone who wouldn't care about their status. The next couple of years were pretty tough on them. Mohammed worked delivering pizza and Chinese food driving his moped.
I didn't come to the United States to break my back.
One day he even delivered Chinese food to Ringo Starr, who tipped him, as Qissi remembered, with the $100 bill.
You took the 100. No, that's no. See, the $1. See, $1 is for you.
Meanwhile, Jean-Claude married a local girl and got steady job in a family business growing carpets. Oh yeah, he hated every minute of that job, but that was the price to pay for staying in a beautiful home with his in-laws. On the other hand, Qissi had to share a single room with several people, nice folks from Mexico who worked as dishwashers at a nearby restaurant. Like with many beginning actors, there was a moment when they were considering calling it quits, but a lucky break was just around the corner. In 1984, they scored a small part in the breakdance movie called Breakin'. Mohammed's role was to play a background dancer. This was his very first debut in front of the camera. You can spot Mohammed jumping in his black short while Jean-Claude was peacocking in his tank top. While all they did was dance, nothing could have made them happier. The dream was finally taking shape. It was all about grasping as much screen time as possible. Qissi encouraged Jean-Claude to showcase some of his fancy moves in hopes of grabbing the attention of potential producers. He always pushed Jean-Claude to do more, kicking his butt to be better at everything: school, training, acting, because he truly believed in Jean-Claude's talent and that he had everything needed to become a movie star. Mohammed's idea was to mold Claude into Arnold and Stallone with martial arts. Even though he was younger than Claude, Qissi always acted as a big brother in the family. The turning point in Mohammed Qissi and Jean-Claude Van Damme career took place when they weaseled their way into the office of big Hollywood producer Menahem Golan. That was a mission full of lies and deception. But is there any other way to get in front of the big shots in Hollywood? Yeah, didn't think so. Menahem Golan was an Israeli film producer, screenwriter, and a director. He co-owned the Canon Group, specialized in producing low to mid-budget American films, primarily genre films. Golan produced films featuring actors such as Sean Connery, Sylvester Stallone, Chuck Norris, in the near future Jean-Claude Van Damme and Charles Bronson. One evening they ran into Menahem Golan outside of the restaurant, who was drunk to the boot. Without much hesitation, Qissi approached Menahem and introduced himself and Claude. He also reminded Menahem that they had met a few years ago and that he was the one who suggested that they try their luck in films. Whether Menahem remembered or not, he gave them his business card and told them to call him sometime. Next morning, Qissi, being a man of action, told Jean-Claude to finish his breakfast and get ready to go visit Mr. Golan. Jean-Claude, as usual, was too cautious and wanted to call Menahem first, but Qissi dismissed that nonsense, telling Claude that, "Hey, we're gonna go there in person, forget about any calls." At the gates, security stopped them and asked about their business. Qissi proceeded to lie through his teeth, spinning stories on the fly that they had dinner with Menahem Golan the night before and that he was expecting them today. He banked on Golan being so drunk that he wouldn't remember much and would just let them in. That is exactly what happened, and they proceeded inside and stepped into the elevator. After they reached the penthouse level and stepped into the waiting room, all they heard was Golan yelling and screaming about something behind the door. Jean-Claude got really nervous. He thought it was about them breaking into the building unannounced. But Qissi was on a roll and told him to chill and just wait. It turned out Golan was talking to Stallone's agent regarding his fees for taking the role in Over the Top, as Menahem was also wanted to direct the movie. Anyways, Qissi and Claude had no idea that the yelling and screaming was part of the Golan's personality, so they waited for him to come out. Eventually, all the yelling stopped, and Golan came out of his office. He glanced at Qissi and Jean-Claude, taking a moment to attempt to recognize who those two guys were and what the heck were they doing in there. Finally, some faint memories kicked in and he said, "It's you. Go to the second floor and meet Bob." At this point, Jean-Claude was completely freaked out and wanted to leave because he knew from rumors that all Bob wanted was for Jean-Claude to be his very special friend. In the elevator, Claude was rapidly pushing the button 0 to escape his inevitable fate, but Qissi was not ready to give up just yet and pressed the second floor button instead. If they had to meet Bob to get further, then Bob it was. It wasn't the first time he had to drag Jean-Claude along while he was kicking and screaming. When they got to the second floor, Bob was there waiting in his office, visibly irritated as he asked why they got over his head straight to the boss. Qissi had to cook up yet another lie, claiming that the whole situation was just a misunderstanding due to his poor English and that they hadn't planned any of that. After listening to Qissi for a while, Bob looked straight at Jean-Claude and said, "Okay, I have all of your information, and you know what you have to do."
Okay.
The awkward silence stretched on, feeling like an eternity. All Qissi could think of was, "Claude is gonna definitely kill me." Suddenly a phone rang. It was Bob's office phone. Qissi quickly mumbled some apologies, stating that they didn't want to disturb him any further, and hurriedly left the office, rushing towards the elevator. Once again, Jean-Claude wanted nothing more than to get out of there, but Qissi had a mission to complete. While Claude pressed once again 0 button on the elevator, Qissi, again, interrupted the descent, selecting the first floor instead. He needed to stay in the building as long as it took to secure something solid with the producer because he knew there might not be another chance like this. When they got out of elevator, Qissi was so mad at Claude that he basically told him to shut up and stop complaining. He had banked his entire savings on this trip, which amounted to $11,000, and they were already down to just $2,500, leaving them with very little chance to stay longer in Hollywood. To avoid the whole elevator up and down play, Qissi took the stairs all the way up to the penthouse level. They went to the same room and waited for Golan. When Menahem finally emerged, he saw the same two dorks and asked, "What happened? Why are you still here?" Qissi went out on limb once more, spinning another tale about how he had gone to the second floor, but Bob was not there, so they had to come back, and so on and so forth. It was another fib, but who could tell if Golan believed it or not? Regardless, he decided to give Qissi and Jean-Claude 2 minutes of his time to pitch their deal and went back into his office. Secretary Helen brought in 2 cups of coffee while they waited for Golan to wrap up his current call. Jean-Claude went into a full panic mode, asking, "What are we going to do? What are we supposed to do now?" But Qissi had a perfect plan. He said to Claude, "Look, Golan is a Jewish. Pretend you're on the market and have to sell him a carpet. You've got to lay it down, show its beauty in all its glory, basically sell the darn thing. So, when we go inside the office, I'm going to take 2 chairs and you will do a crazy split right in front of him." I bet he never seen anything like that before. Well, that's the plan that they agreed to. Once in the office, Jean-Claude jumped into a perfect split between the 2 chairs. Qissi placed a few covers of Jean-Claude on Golan's desk, and all he could remember was that bizarre look on Golan's face. Huge tummy, big glasses, and his tongue sticking out. After a minute of this strange sight, Golan finally told them he had their number and would call them. Qissi knew that Golan would most likely never call, so he decided to go all in. He approached Golan practically up to his face and said, "With respect, Mr. Golan, you are making a very big mistake sending us away. Jean-Claude is playing a big villain role against Arnold Schwarzenegger in a big Hollywood movie." He conveniently omitted to mention that Jean-Claude was actually just a stuntman wearing a city alien costume in the early version of Predator. Qissi noticed that Claude was sweating next to him, fully aware of his actual part in the movie, but Mohammed was too far in to turn back. With nothing to lose, he stared into Golan's eyes, eager to see how would he react. At first, he thought Golan would call security on them, but instead Golan said, "So, he is playing too heavy." Qissi didn't know what that meant, but assumed it was a good thing. By the way, playing too heavy means to act the part of villain character, pretty much be the bad guy on screen. Golan called his secretary Helen and asked her to reach out to Jackie Birch, the casting director of Predator. At that time, the working title was Hunter. Golan asked Jackie if she was aware of Jean-Claude. "Yes," she said. "He's playing the main villain in the movie." "Brilliant," replied Golan. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear." Fortunately, Jackie was probably too busy and didn't mention the whole costume business. After hanging up the phone, Golan turned to Qissi and asked if they had a lawyer. "Yes, we do." "Great," said Golan. "We are going to draft a few contracts for 2 or 3 movies. The first movie is going to be..." He rummaged through his desk drawer, pulled out a screenplay and threw it on the table. "This is going to be the first one," he said. Just so you know that the title of the screenplay was Bloodsport. Jean-Claude glanced over the screenplay and asked, "Mr. Menahem, what is going to be my part?" Menahem looked at Jean-Claude and slowly, emphasizing every word, he replied, "You imbecile, you are the star of the movie." This is how Mohammed Qissi kickstarted Jean-Claude's movie star career and also got himself into some of the most memorable action martial art movies of the 80s, including Bloodsport, Kickboxer, and Lionheart. Stay tuned for part 2, where we will dive deeper into Mohammed's soon-to-be-known by his stage name Michel Qissi journey in Hollywood.